It didn't end overnight. Looking back now, I realize the end crept in slowly, like a train easing into a station. First came the silences, then the short replies. Eventually, the conversations just stopped altogether. The touch, the laughter, even the good morning lost its warmth. But even with everything falling apart in front of me, I held on. We always hold on when there's still love, even if the other person is already miles away, emotionally at least. My name is Michael Carter. I'm 42 years old, and up until recently, I thought my life was stable. I was married to Sarah for 12 years. We didn't have kids, but we had 2 dogs and a routine that, while predictable, felt safe. I had grown used to weekend grocery, runs, quiet arguments about what to watch, shared bills, and what I thought were normal silences. When she finally said, "I can't do this anymore," I froze. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just stood there, trying to understand how everything we built had vanished. She packed a suitcase and left, just like that. She took her clothes, her books, and my peace. The first few days were chaos, coming home to a dark apartment, no smell of the coffee she used to make. It felt like stepping into an abandoned museum. Everything reminded me of her. Even the smallest things, the soap she liked, the fridge magnet from our last vacation. I couldn't sleep. I faked being okay at work. I slipped into autopilot. I said, "I'm fine," in the elevator. But inside, something was falling apart. Depression didn't knock on the door with a warning. It came in quietly while I pretended to live. At first, I thought it was just sadness. "It'll pass," I kept telling myself. But the days grew grayer, and I stopped enjoying the things I once loved. Food lost its taste. Movies felt pointless. Talking to friends became exhausting. I started pulling away, making excuses, saying I was tired. The truth was, I didn't want anyone to see me like that, middle-aged, heartbroken, and completely lost. The worst part was the overwhelming sense of failure. I kept asking myself where I went wrong. Was I too distant? Did I stop loving and not notice? Or did I love too much, too blindly? When love walks out the door, it doesn't just leave a person-shaped hole. It takes away who you were when you were with them. I didn't know who I was without Sarah. It felt like someone had erased my reflection. Everything I believed defined me was tied to us, and now all that was left was me. I started blaming myself for everything. I replayed every argument, every cold stare, every word I didn't say. The guilt turned into anger, then into numbness. I got out of bed because I had to work, but the rest of the day was just empty. I'd come home, collapse on the couch, and stare at the ceiling like it might drop answers. I even cried in my car once, parked in the garage, tears streaming, down until I had nothing left. And still, the next day I put on the mask and survived. Not lived, just survived. Post-divorce depression is cruel. It's a silent mourning. No one sends flowers, no one visits. Because you didn't lose someone to death, you lost them to life, and people expect you to bounce back quickly. "She didn't deserve you," they'd say. "You'll find someone better." But they didn't understand that it's not just the person who's gone, it's the future you dreamed of together. It's the idea of growing old side by side, the plans for next summer, the baby name you'd picked out, the new couch you never bought. It took a long time for me to admit I needed help. My sister saw me at Christmas and said with tears in her eyes, "You're not Michael anymore." That hit me hard, and she was right. I was a shadow of myself. One night, between sleepless hours, I looked up a therapist. It was my last shot before I truly disappeared. I didn't want to lose myself completely, and that's when the journey to rebuild began. If this story is touching you in any way, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. This simple gesture means a lot to our work and encourages us to keep sharing real, deep, and human stories. Stories that offer comfort, spark reflection, and remind us that no one is truly alone. Thank you so much for being here. Your presence matters, always. Therapy wasn't a miracle. It didn't fix me overnight. To be honest, I walked into my first session with low expectations. I sat on the edge of the couch, arms crossed, pretending I wasn't as broken as I felt. The therapist's name was Dr. Howard Benson, a man in his 60s with kind eyes and a quiet voice. He didn't try to dissect me in the first session, he just listened. That alone felt new. Someone finally listened, not to reply, not to give advice, but to truly hear me. I talked about Sarah, about the silences, about the way she used to twirl her hair when she was nervous, about how she stopped looking at me like I was her person. Dr. Benson nodded gently, sometimes scribbling things in his notebook. At the end of that first session, he said, "Michael, what you're feeling is grief. And grief, when not processed, becomes depression. Let's give your pain a name so we can work through it." That line stuck with me, giving my pain a name. For months I'd been walking around carrying something heavy, but I didn't know what to call it. Was it heartbreak, regret, loneliness? Turns out it was all of that, and more. Once we named it, we could face it. And slowly, painfully, I began to face myself. I started journaling. Not big revelations, just simple thoughts. I miss her. I feel useless. I don't know who I am without her. Some days all I could write was, "I'm tired," but those words became a mirror. They showed me how deep I had sunk, and also where I could begin to climb back out. One thing that surprised me was how many men go through this silently. During one group therapy session, I met David, a man in his 50s going through a similar divorce. He said something I'll never forget. Society expects us to take the hit and keep walking. We're not allowed to fall apart. That hit me like a punch to the chest. It was true. I had spent so much time pretending to be okay because I believed I wasn't allowed to be not okay. Men weren't supposed to cry in their cars. We weren't supposed to feel like ghosts in our own homes. But I did. And the moment I accepted that truth, something shifted inside me. I began to notice the small victories. A day when I didn't cry, a meal I cooked for myself and actually enjoyed, a night of full sleep after weeks of tossing and turning. I started taking long walks around the neighborhood, sometimes with no destination, just me and the sound of my footsteps. I reconnected with my friend Alex, who invited me to join a weekend hiking group. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want to be around happy people. But I went, and for the first time in months I felt present. One morning after a particularly quiet hike, I stood at the top of a small hill, breathing in the crisp air, and I realized something strange. I was still here. Not the same, but still here. I had survived the silence, the heartbreak, the nights of tears and empty beds, and even though I was far from healed, I was no longer lost. Sarah and I exchanged a few messages during that time. Nothing deep, just updates about mutual friends or the dogs. One day she wrote, "I hope you're doing okay." I stared at that message for a long time. I wanted to pour my heart out, tell her everything. But instead I replied, "I'm learning to be." And it was the truth. There were still hard days. Some mornings I'd wake up reaching for someone who wasn't there. Other nights I'd find myself scrolling through old photos, wondering if any of it had ever been real. But those moments no longer owned me. They were memories, not monsters. Therapy gave me tools, but more than that, it gave me permission to grieve, to speak, to be vulnerable. I started volunteering at a local community center, talking to other men going through separation, job loss, even retirement. Pain takes many forms, and loneliness doesn't discriminate. We sat in a circle, shared our stories, and found comfort in knowing we weren't alone. Looking back now, I don't see the divorce as the end of my life. It was the end of one chapter, yes, but also the painful beginning of something new. I was forced to meet myself again, stripped of titles and routines. And while I didn't always like what I saw, I learned to be patient, to offer myself grace. For a long time, I thought love had to come from someone else, that I needed a partner to feel complete, but I've come to realize that the most important relationship I'll ever have is with myself. And that relationship was finally starting to heal. Healing, I discovered, doesn't follow a straight path. Some days I felt almost normal. Others, I fell back into that familiar heaviness, like a fog rolling in out of nowhere. I learned to stop expecting consistency from my emotions. Progress, I realized, wasn't about never falling. Progress was about learning how to get back up. The strange thing is, when you're in pain for so long, you begin to fear peace. The silence that once felt unbearable now felt suspicious. I'd wake up on a good morning and wonder when the sadness would return, like a storm I knew would always come back. Dr. Benson helped me understand that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to carry the pain differently, letting it exist without letting it consume. I still had to live my life, even on the hard days. Work helped with that. I started showing up more present, more honest. When co-workers asked how I was doing, I stopped lying. I'd say things like, "It's been tough, but I'm getting there." That kind of honesty made people lean in. To my surprise, I wasn't the only one going through something. One of my colleagues, James, confided in me about his own divorce 2 years earlier. He told me he hadn't seen his daughter since the separation. We ended up having coffee after work one day, and for the first time, I didn't feel so isolated. It's funny how shared pain builds bridges. The hardest moment came one Sunday afternoon. I was cleaning the attic, trying to stay busy, and I found a box labeled Us. It was full of old letters, anniversary cards, and ticket stubs from our trips. I sat down on the dusty floor, the sunlight filtering through a small window, and read through them one by one. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't sad, but because I had finally accepted the truth. It was beautiful while it lasted. That day, I made a decision. I packed that box back up, wrote a short letter thanking Sarah for the memories, and drove it to her place. I didn't ask to come in. I just left it on the doorstep. No drama, no bitterness, just closure. For both of us, that small act felt like a release, like I was finally giving myself permission to move forward. I started saying yes to life again, not in big ways, but in small, almost invisible ones. I said yes to dinner with friends. I said yes to trying a cooking class, even though I burned the chicken. I said yes to joining a local book club where I barely knew anyone. One of the women there, Olivia, struck up a conversation with me after a meeting. She had this warm, gentle way of speaking, and something about her felt safe. We exchanged numbers, and for a while, we just talked. No pressure, no rushing. Just two people learning how to be human again. Olivia wasn't Sarah, and that's exactly why it worked. She didn't try to fill the void left behind. She just sat with me in it, listened when I needed to talk, laughed with me when the moment was light. She asked about my therapy, my hikes, my writing. With her, I didn't feel like I had to be healed to be loved. I could be in process. I could be a work in progress. One evening, months later, she came over for dinner. I had cleaned the apartment top to bottom, cooked pasta, this time without burning anything, and lit candles. After the meal, we sat on the balcony with cups of tea in our hands. The city lights twinkled in the distance. She looked at me and said softly, "You seem lighter lately, like you're breathing deeper," and I realized I was, not because the pain was gone, but because I had stopped fighting it. I had learned to carry it with grace, to let it remind me of who I was and what I had survived. Some nights I still lie in bed and think about the past. I don't push those memories away. I let them visit. But now I don't invite them to stay. I've learned that life after heartbreak isn't about forgetting. It's about rebuilding, slowly, kindly. One moment at a time, the person I am today. is not the same man who watched his wife walk out the door. That version of me broke open, but in the cracks, something new started to grow. Something stronger, something softer, and for the first time in a long while, I believe in tomorrow again. There's a strange, quiet power in starting over, in waking up one morning and realizing that the person you used to be no longer fits the skin you live in. That realization came to me not through some dramatic epiphany, but on a simple Tuesday. I was folding laundry. A song came on, one that Sarah and I used to dance to in the kitchen, and for the first time, I didn't feel the sharp sting in my chest. I smiled softly, not because I missed her, but because that moment had meant something once, and now it had simply passed. Grief, it turns out, isn't just about what you lose, it's also about what you learn to hold differently. That week, I talked to Dr. Benson about that moment. He nodded, as he always did, and said something that stuck with me. Michael, pain doesn't always leave, but it does loosen its grip. And when that happens, you can finally choose what to do with your hands. Those words lingered. I started making intentional choices about how I wanted to live, really live. I took a weekend trip to the mountains alone, something I never would have dared before. I stayed in a quiet cabin, brought books I never finished, and spent long hours walking unfamiliar trails. I wrote in my journal every night, not to document pain, but to capture gratitude. Gratitude for the air, the silence, the second chances. There was one morning during that trip I'll never forget. I woke up early, made coffee, and stepped outside wrapped in a blanket. The sunrise was slow, golden, like the world was waking, up just for me. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel lonely. I felt alone, yes, but not lonely. There's a difference. And understanding that difference changed everything. Coming back from that trip, I saw my apartment differently. It no longer felt like a museum of what was. It felt like mine. I rearranged the furniture, donated some of the old things we'd bought together, and even painted one of the walls a bold blue, something Sarah never would have liked, but I loved it. I was claiming space again, not just in my home, but in my own life. One evening, Olivia came over and noticed the changes. She smiled and said, "It feels like you're finally living in your own story now." And she was right. For so long, I had been a supporting character in a life that had ended. Now I was slowly writing a new narrative, one built not on what I lost, but on what I was learning to build. I also began reconnecting with my family, something I hadn't done much of during the marriage. I took my nephew to a baseball game, had long talks with my mom on Sunday afternoons, and started helping my dad with his garden again. It's strange how much I had let those relationships fade. But pain has a way of showing you what truly matters, and family. That mattered. One day, my mother said to me, "I'm proud of you, Michael. I know you don't hear that often, but I see how hard you're trying." I didn't know how much I needed those words until I heard them. I held back tears and hugged her tighter than I had in years. Sometimes healing comes in whispers from the people who never left your side. But not every day was bright. There were setbacks. A random memory would hit me out of nowhere. A restaurant we used to love, a movie we saw together, her handwriting on an old sticky note. Those moments still pulled at my chest, but they didn't drag me under anymore. I had built emotional muscles that allowed me to stand. Dr. Benson once told me that moving on doesn't mean replacing what was. It means making space for something new without erasing the old. I used to think I had to forget Sarah to move forward, but I see now she'll always be part of my story. A meaningful chapter, not the whole book. And the book, well, it's still being written. Olivia and I never rushed into anything serious. We respected each other's scars. We shared them, actually. She had her own wounds from a past she didn't often talk about, and I never forced it. We were two people, learning how to hold space for each other, no demands, just presence. She once said to me, "You don't have to be healed to be worthy of love." That phrase unraveled something inside me. For months, I believed I had to be whole again to deserve another chance. But Olivia, with her quiet understanding, showed me that healing can happen in the presence of love, not just in its absence. Started smiling more, laughing again. I found joy in the mundane: morning coffee, warm socks, the feel of a freshly cleaned apartment. Life didn't feel like a punishment anymore. It felt like a canvas, and I was finally picking up the brush. Looking back now, I realized that the end of my marriage wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the end of the person I used to be. That version of Michael, the one who thought love meant holding on no matter what, the one who believed pain should be hidden and healing should be quiet. He no longer exists in the way he once did. And that's not a tragedy, it's growth. There's a moment in every healing journey when you stop measuring your life by what you lost and start seeing it for what it is becoming. For me, that moment came on an ordinary morning. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, lacing up my shoes to go for a jog, and I caught my reflection in the mirror. I didn't look particularly different. Same tired eyes, same short beard. But there was something softer in my expression. I looked like someone who had finally made peace with himself. It wasn't about being over Sarah. It wasn't about finding someone new or ticking boxes of recovery. It was about coming home to myself and realizing that even after the storm, the foundation was still there, solid, quiet, waiting. I began to speak openly about my experience, not just in therapy or in private conversations, but in broader ways. I wrote a piece for a local mental health blog, sharing my story in detail. The response stunned me. Dozens of men reached out. Some were newly divorced. Others had been silently struggling in long-term relationships that had already died emotionally. Many just said, "Thank you for saying what I couldn't." That's when it hit me. So many of us are suffering in silence because we're told we have to be strong, composed, in control. But true strength, I learned, is in saying, "I'm not okay right now." And true courage is in asking for help. Anyway, over time I got involved with a support organization that offers emotional assistance to men going through life transitions, divorce, job loss, grief. I started mentoring, not because I had all the answers, but because I knew how it felt to sit in the dark. Sometimes, just sitting beside someone else in that darkness is all they need. My relationship with Olivia deepened naturally. There was no grand moment, no dramatic declarations, just a steady, quiet unfolding. We learned each other's rhythms. We respected each other's fears. We loved with a softness that I hadn't known before. One day, while we were reading on the couch, with our feet tangled together, she looked up at me and said, "You're the calmest kind of strong I've ever met." And I realized that's who I had become. Strong not because I never broke, strong because I did and still chose to rebuild. There's still a piece of my heart that holds space for the man I was during those darkest days. I don't resent him. I don't hide him. He was trying his best. He kept going when it would have been easier to give up. And now, when I speak to others who are where I once was, I tell them this: you won't feel this way forever. Even if right now everything feels heavy and hopeless, there is a version of you somewhere ahead who is lighter, stronger, more at peace. You're not walking toward him. You're becoming him. The journey through depression taught me more about life, love, and resilience than anything else ever could. I stopped seeing myself as someone broken by love and began to see myself as someone reshaped by it. I now understand that not all stories are meant to last forever, but every story leaves something behind. Sarah left me with memories, yes, but also with lessons. I no longer fear loneliness the way I once did. I no longer chase happiness as if it's hiding around a corner. I've learned to find it in the quiet moments, in the way sunlight hits the floor, in the rhythm of my breathing, in the comfort of simply existing without having to prove anything to anyone. So if you're reading this or listening to this, and you're in that place I was, curled up on a couch with your heart in pieces, I want you to know this isn't the end. It's the beginning of your return, not to who you were, but to who you're meant to become. And trust me, that version of you is worth the journey.